Amius the Lunar Archon. There he is. I have gotten a lot of requests lately to do another video on Amius, and so that's what we're going to do in today's video. Now, you should be aware this is rotation number 5 of the City of Centranos. The only reason I mention that is because the conditions do change from rotation to rotation, but the fight stays the same, and so the theory will be the same regardless of what rotation is currently happening when you watch this video. In addition, we will be taking him on in normal mode. There really isn't much of a difference between normal and hard modes in this fight mechanically. It's more just about stats. So again, this video should stand as a pretty good guide for hard mode as well. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be talking through the fight a little bit, and then we're going to walk through the fight with the team that I put together because you really need to see it in action. This is a complex fight. There are a lot of moving parts. It's kind of like Hydra. Right? You need to see it several times before you start to get a rhythm with it. And then once you kind of figure it out, it feels much more comfortable. And the reason I'm doing this video really is because of that. I think there are a lot of players out there who may have the roster and the gear to take down Amius, but who avoid the fight because it's just a frustrating fight and a confusing fight. And so hopefully today's video will alleviate some of that for some of you. Okay, we may as well jump into it. I am Colred. This is Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. Let's get started. It is the month of September here at Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. We are shooting for 10,000 subscribers by the end of this month. So if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal. And as always, smash that like button and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much for all of your support in helping us reach our goal. And let's get back to the video. Okay, so what we usually do with these boss guides is we usually come over here to the boss guide in-game and we talk through all of this guide. We go over the skills, we talk about what it means, what kinds of champions you might want to have on your team, things you need to watch out for. And I found that for Amius, this is a little bit suboptimal. It's a difficult read. It's not as clear as just seeing the skills. So rather than worry about the skills here, we're going to read the skills in game and talk about them so that you can see them in real time. But I do want to mention this awakened weakness because this is really important for not just Amius, but also for like hard mode dungeons. This is something that we see in a lot of places. Awakened Weakened is a passive on the boss that decreases the damage inflicted by the boss for each awakening level on the target champion. Basically what it means is when a boss hits your champion, he does less damage based on the number of awakened stars that champion has. In addition, your champion does more damage to the boss for the number of awakened stars that that champion has. So you can make this fight relatively trivial, a lot easier if you're bringing in a lot of champions with 4, 5, and 6 star awakening. If you're coming in with champions who have no awakenings or 1 or 2 stars, that's going to make the fight a lot harder. So be aware that regardless of the kit of the champions that you're bringing, regardless of the team composition that you theory craft, if you don't have enough awakened stars, this is going to be a tough fight. And if you have a lot of awakened stars, even if you don't have perfect synergy amongst your champions, they're going to probably do a lot better, especially your damage dealers, your big hitters. The more stars that you have, the better off you are. So I just wanted to mention that right from the get-go because it's a big factor. It's a big factor in your chances of success. But now let's go ahead and put together a team, and we're going to jump into the actual fight. So these are the champions that are available right now. By the way, if you're not exactly sure what these conditions are or restrictions are, what I recommend you do is just go here to the champions icon, click that, and come in here, and you'll see that the filter is still selected, but there's actually additional filters selected here. What you can just do is drop down to the faction, and you'll notice that the factions that are part of this rotation or this restriction are already selected. So we now know, if we didn't know before based on the icons in the previous screen, that the 5 factions available to us are Sacred Order, Lizardmen, Orcs, Knights Revenant, and Dwarves. So I'm going to go ahead back to the previous screen. And as you can see, those are what these 5 icons are for. But sometimes, it's not as clear. Maybe you don't have those icons memorized. So you can always go ahead into the filter, or I'm sorry, the champions tab and find it there. Now, I am going to be using some very good champions today with some high blessings. That's just the way it works. I'm not trying to build like a free-to-play friendly team or anything like that. I just want to show you the fight so that you can theory craft your own composition. So I am going to be bringing in Cardiel here, who's my favorite champion, by the way. Cardiel as my lead. Now, the speed for Amius here is 200 on normal, so that's not too bad, but it can help to be faster than he is. So a speed or a champion can be really great. In addition, you will benefit from a cleanser and potentially a block debuffs buff and heals and all that stuff. So Cardiel brings a lot to the table. By the way, if you're not sure about things like stats, remember that you can always go to hellhades.com. So let me go ahead and pull that up for you right now. You just come up to the Raid Shadow Legends drop-down menu and go over to Raid Stages tool, select that, and then select City of Centranos. You want to grab Amius the Lunar Archon, and then we're going to do normal difficulty. Stage. Now, it doesn't matter what rotation is listed up here. All of the rotations have the same stats. So like these factions are not the current factions, but these stats are the current stats. And as you can see, he has resistance of 350, which means you need 375 accuracy to overcome his resistance. He has 450 accuracy, so you would need 555 resistance to overcome his accuracy. Now, if you don't know, and this is important here, I haven't really mentioned this before, but this isn't like 100% accurate, and this isn't 100% resistance. That's not how this works here. The Raid Stages tool actually is like calibrated a little bit differently. If you actually scroll up here, what you can see is resistance and accuracy stat checks. It says this has been calculated to a 95% chance to place debuffs and a 90% chance to resist enemy effects. So it's not 100%. It's not perfect, right? Just be aware that it's a very high degree of accuracy and a very good level of resistance, but it's not perfect. So you could certainly exceed these numbers if you wanted to, but there is a diminishing returns. There is a diminishing return on both accuracy and resistance. So anyway, using this as a guide, we're going to shoot for around 375 accuracy. I'm not going to worry about the resistance. I'm not going with a resistance-based build, but if you are, be aware that the resistance requirement is relatively high. And if you want to check hard mode, you'll see that hard mode is even higher. So it's an additional 100 resistance that you need and 100 accuracy. The speed, by the way, for hard mode is 250, so that is a significant bump up in speed as well. I just wanted to mention that, but again, you could always come here to hellhades.com and get those stats for yourself. Back to our team building. Now, you probably want a reviver. I have my cleanser, healer, block debuffs champion, but I probably want a reviver. And there is a lot going on with buffs and debuffs in this fight. You want to be very careful. You want to have the choice about whether you're placing buffs or debuffs. So I'm going to bring in a healer who doesn't bring any buffs or debuffs. I'm just going to go ahead and bring in Godseeker and Eerie. Now, again, I know you may not have champions like this. Be aware that, again, you don't have to build this team. I'm just letting you know sort of the conditions that are going on in the fight and why I'm choosing the champions I'm choosing. Now, a healing reduction can be useful. It's not required, but it is useful. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Venom Mage. And then I would like a secondary cleanser, somebody whose cleanse is hard to stop, basically. It would be good to have a really high resist Mithrala in another rotation would be fine. But in this case, I'm just going to go with Doom Priest. Now, Doom Priest is beautiful for this. She's absolutely beautiful for this because her cleanse is a passive that can't be stopped. And you can see she's got 5 Awakening Stars for me. So yeah, absolutely, I'm going to bring her in here. So now I've got really 3 healers, 2 cleansers, and a block debuffs. And now I need some more damage. And the good thing about this rotation, if you have Newt, is that dwarves are in play. And so I can bring in Newt here. Now, where is Newt? If I can find his face, there he is. The only downside for me personally about Newt is that he's only got 2 stars. And that's sort of the bare minimum. Because he's a defensive-based damage dealer and he's relatively tanky and he hits really hard, I'm going to get away probably with just the 2-star damage dealer. But if you had a Trunda who had 5 stars or something, I would use her instead. You could certainly use like an attack-based damage dealer. The attack-based damage dealer would actually synergize a little bit better with this team because my Doom Priest brings an increased attack buff, and I don't have an increased defense buff here on this team, so I can't really buff Newt's damage, but still, he just hits super hard. By the way, you can absolutely do like a poison or HP burn composition. So if you have Artak can be very good. He has that decreased attack you need. He has HP burn. So there are a lot of champions here. There's a lot of flexibility. You don't have to bring in these champions. You can bring in a lot of different champions. You could certainly use epics too. You know, there are epics. Whisper would be absolutely great. You can see my Whisper only has 1 awakening star. So it's not that she's an epic. That's not why I'm avoiding her here. I actually would be very happy to use her, but she dies too easily. She takes too much damage. So if she had like 3 or 4 stars, I'd be much more likely to use her. So like my Skull Crown here, I could probably get away with at 3 stars. But again, I have Newt, so why not use them? So this is what we're going to do. And again, this is more about what the champions do than who the champions are. So a cleanse, a block buffs debuff, a decrease attack, a healing reduction, a couple of extra cleanses, some extra heals, and at least 1 really hard-hitting damage dealer. Because Amius does heal himself, and you can't always have your healing reduction on at the perfect moment. So you do have to overcome him with a certain amount of damage. You could bring in a team with 2 damage dealers. Like I could say, maybe I've got enough stars that I don't have to worry about bringing in a reviver, and I could leave Godseeker and Neri on the bench and bring in another damage dealer here. Or like if my Venom Mage was really hard-hitting, she's not. She's like, okay. Then that would make up the difference. But again, it's really up to you. If you have no idea about what teams to build, you could certainly go to the Hell Hades Optimizer if you have that, and that is going to give you suggestions. But again, remember, if you go to the boss guide, you can come here to Teams of the Week, and you can take a look at the suggested teams here. Now, as you can see, there are some crazy compositions with like double Newts and double Acrisias and Cardiel. Like that's an incredibly hard team to put together. There aren't many players in the game who aren't massive Krakens who have that team. But you can see some champions who are valuable. We've got a Necmo Thar here. We've got a Dracomorph. Here's a Venom Mage. We do have a Whisper team here. So there, Whisper can absolutely work. We've got some other teams here. We've got a Brogni. Brogni has a block debuff buff. He's also got some survivability. He's got HP burn. So, here we've got White Queen and Cora. So there are other champions, that can come in and do the job. Here again is Pythion and Artak. So there are ways to get ideas about what champions to bring in here. This is just the one that I put together for today's video. That's it. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything other than hopefully that it works. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the fight. Okay, so one thing that we need to know about this fight is that there are 2 forms of Amius. He has sort of a daytime form and a nighttime form. This is the primary form. Think of him, he's a mythic champion, basically. He can transform, right? He can transform into his alternate form. So this is his base form. Now, in his base form, he has 3 skills that he uses. This is his A1, Waxing Potence. We'll talk about that in a second. This is his A2, Lunar Storm, and this is his A3, Rampant Chaos. Now, his A2 and his A3 are the skills that you need to worry about. His A1 is not really something that we need to worry about too much. And what you need to worry about is which one is he going to open with. Now, his A2, you can see, before attacking, increases duration of all buffs and decreases duration of all debuffs on Amius. Heals Amius by 20% of his max HP. It's a big heal. And then fills turn meter. And this is based on the debuffs that has its duration decreased. So this one will typically be fired if he doesn't have a lot of debuffs and you have several buffs. That's basically why this fire. Now the second one, Rampant Chaos, removes his debuffs and turns them into buffs. So if he has a decreased attack, it turns into an increased attack. If he has a heal reduction or a weaken, it turns into a continuous heal or strengthen. If he has a decreased defense, it turns into an increased defense. Right? If he has a decreased crit rate, it turns into an increased crit rate. So he takes any debuff and turns it into the equivalent buff for the most part. Now there are exceptions. 3 exceptions that you care about. One is HP burn. 2 is poison, and 3 is smite, right? So if you have a brimstone blessing, he doesn't cleanse that or remove that or turn that into anything. So those will not get removed or changed. The most important one probably is decrease attack. You don't want to hit him with a decrease attack that he'll then turn into an increase attack, because with the increase attack up, he will likely hit very hard and he may kill you and ruin your run. Now, in order to handle this skill when he fires it, you could bring in a champion who strips buffs. Unfortunately, I don't really have a good champion that strips buffs in this rotation other than Seer. I don't really want to use Seer for this fight. So if you have a champion that strips buffs, you could certainly use that as a sort of a counter to Rampant Chaos, or you simply have to play around and know how to activate his A2 versus his A3. What I mean by activate is like, what can you do to get him to fire one of these skills? Now, if I go ahead and use Cardiel's ally attack here, I get a whole bunch of buffs, and that's going to force Amius to use his A2. Or I could hold off on that and try to land some debuffs and force him to use his A3. And I can really decide which one is better off for me. Now, one of the things about this A3 is he also stuns all of your champions. This is what the block debuffs buff is for. Okay, but remember, if you put that up, you're going to encourage him to use his A2, and that could just waste your block debuffs. So what you need to do is get more debuffs on him than you've got buffs on yourself. And it's important then to recognize that he's going to change all of those into buffs. And so you have to worry about that. Your other option is to not do anything. Don't hit him with anything. Don't hit him with any buffs or debuffs. And he'll just go ahead and probably fire the A2, leaving the A3 for next. And then you can start to buff yourself until he uses the A3. And then once he uses the A3, you can debuff him. Now, this is Form 1. It is on a 4-turn counter. You can see the counter is right here, the Archon's Ascendance. After he goes 4 times, he will change into his alternate form, and it will become nighttime here. You'll see the change. It's like a blood moon. It's kind of cool. But sometimes the graphics get messed up. So if you want to know which form he is in, all you have to do is look at the skills. Does he have these 3 skills? These are the A1 form. I'm sorry, the primary form. Does he have the other skills we'll talk about in just a sec? Then he's in his alternate form. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of avoid buffing or debuffing. I do have, unfortunately, I have several Bloodstone rings on this team. And so I'm going to be getting shields. And as a result, he's almost certainly going to use the A2 first. But that's okay. I don't really care. He will heal himself. You can see he's going to heal himself back up there, full health. Okay. Now that didn't hit particularly hard because you can see the skill is like, it's okay. It hits decently hard. He does get increased heal for each buff that has its duration increased. That's on him. And he gets turn meter for each debuff that has its duration decreased. So this is why I've avoided buffs and debuffs. Basically, now that skill is relatively toothless as long as you have a decent amount of defense. You can see, like, it's not nothing, right? Newt lost about 50% of his health. Now I can go ahead and buff myself just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. So when it comes around, we'll see. I don't have a lot of buffs on this team. I don't want to debuff yet. He's going to use this A3 next, so I'm not going to debuff him. I'm going to go ahead and give myself an increased attack. See, I'm starting to get some buffs. Now, I could use my ally attack here if I wanted to. That would give me a lot of buffs. In fact, yeah, let's do that. So now I've got all these buffs. These buffs are not going to get removed or have any negative consequence right now. But here's the thing. When he converts, after these 3 turns, when he converts over to his other form will punish me for being buffed. So I want now these buffs to expire. I don't want to extend them. I don't want to reapply them. I want them to be used in a good moment and then be removed. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep attacking him with A1s. You can see he doesn't heal on his A3, so didn't have to worry. His damage is still there. But now I don't have to worry about debuffing him at all. I can go ahead and debuff him with impunity, and hopefully with my buff still up, I'll do some decent damage. So what we're going to try to do here is go ahead and get our weaken and our decrease attack out. And then we're going to, again, we're not going to buff ourselves. We're going to get the decreased defense here from Venom Mage. Nice little counterattack. We want to make sure everybody is nice and healthy because we are going to take a hard hit when he converts to his other form. And as you can see, he's now on counter 1. So what he's going to do is basically, once his bar is full, he's going to transform. So I'm going to hit him as hard as possible here with Newt in just a second and take as much of his health bar away as I can. So decent damage here. Now, a couple of things. One is you may be wondering about the healing reduction. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Basically, well, no, let's talk about it now. Basically, if he uses his A2 first, then I can throw the healing reduction on him and stop the healing from the A2. But he didn't do that. He did A2, then A3, so I'm not really using the healing reduction much here. But again, I don't want to buff myself right now. I want to let that out. So, okay, now he transforms, and as you can see, he has 3 abilities, and he used one immediately. So as he transforms, he is then going to use one of his skills. And just like his first form, he has 2 choices. He has Blood Moon Vortex or Maniacal Bedlam, because his A1 he's not going to use, right? He's going to always use his activatable skills first. So in this case, it says removes any block debuffs buffs from enemies and replaces them with block buffs. So we don't want to use our Cardiel's block debuffs before the conversion. This also removes any buffs positively affecting stats and replaces them with their mirrored debuff equivalent. So he's doing the opposite of the skill he does in his other form. Before, what he was doing is he was removing his debuffs and turning them into buffs. Now what he's doing is he's removing your buffs and turning them into debuffs. That's why we don't want any buffs right before he transforms. The most dangerous ones, the absolute most dangerous ones, would be increased defense and strengthen, because those get turned into decreased defense and weaken. Okay? Other buffs are not nearly as dangerous. Okay, but you definitely want to avoid increased defense and strengthen, because that gives him an opportunity to just nuke you out, just hit you really hard. Now, his A2 is also an AoE, but before attacking, it increases the duration of all debuffs and decreases the duration of all buffs. So again, it's the mirror of the skill that he uses in his other form. So basically what you need to avoid here is, again, having a lot of buffs or debuffs. So again, I don't want to debuff him. I don't want to buff myself. I'm just going to go ahead and A1. So you're actually, during the entirety of this fight, you're really managing your skills very closely. There are, for sure, full auto teams. But this is by far the best way to understand the fight and to manage sort of the danger areas of the fight, like where your team might get nuked out. Okay. So now he's got his A1. And the important thing about his A1 is it does hit decently hard. If you have a champion that doesn't have a lot of stars, right? This will ignore 100% of the target's defense, but for each star you have, you get some of that defense back. So the more stars, the better. Now, if the attack kills an enemy, it instantly activates his Maniacal Bedlam skill. That is his A3. So it will refire this skill. And that's a problem. It fills his turn meter. It converts your buffs into debuffs. It's just bad. So you don't want him to kill somebody with his A1. So what you need to do is try to get everybody back to full health. You can go ahead and debuff now. It's totally fine to debuff him. He's still got 2 turns to convert back. If you don't know, this little unremovable buff over here that says 2, this is the counter for turning back into his main form. Okay, so when this runs out, he will flip back into his main form. And you can only kill him in his main form. If you kill him in this alternate form, he will heal up to like 50%, I think, and turn back into his main form. So in order to kill him and just wipe him out, you need to kill him in his main form. So we've got 2 turns here where we can do some damage. And then hopefully when he turns back into his main form, his health bar is low enough that we can kill him off. That's the goal. Now, sometimes, depending on the team that you have and the composition and the rotation, it might take you 50 times to flip him back and forth because he keeps healing and it's just a pain and you have to get the skills right. And then sometimes you can kill him sort of as like in a one shot. There's a lot of variability here, but I'm hoping to kill him in 1 more round. If I can't, then I have to go 2 more rounds past that because I have to get back to the main form. So here I'm going to go ahead and drop the fence. I'm going to try to heal everybody up again. I need my Newt at full strength. I am going to ally attack and get as much damage into this Amius as I can in this form so that we're closer to death for him in the next form. Okay, so there we go. Let's hope that Newt survives. Newt does not survive. Newt died. And so the A3 is instantly fired and I lose all my buffs and he gets a ton of turn meter. You can see that that happened. Now, the good news is the passive of Godseeker and Eerie brought my Newt back to life immediately. So he is currently alive, right? But you can see that Amius has now used his A3 in his first form to convert all those debuffs that I put on him into buffs, and then simultaneously turned all my buffs into debuffs, and then simultaneously stunned me with his A3. So this is where Doom Priest is going to potentially be helpful. Unfortunately, the turn meter isn't right here, and she's not going to cleanse anybody of their stun, so I'm going to lose another turn. So Amius is actually getting, I think, 4 turns in a row here, which is the nightmare scenario. So the good news is I can now debuff him with impunity. The bad news is he's got an increased attack up here, and I have no way to remove that. He could potentially wipe out my team. So we're going to go ahead and, I don't know, we're just going to keep nuking him as hard as we can. And nobody has died yet, but the really scary time is when he transforms. When he transforms, that could be bad. We're going to see, yep, he healed up on his A2. We can debuff him, so we will. Let's get that healing reduction out there now with some poisons. That's totally fine. I should have done that before. But remember, once his A2 is fired, you can go ahead and put your healing reduction out. Now, again, I don't want to put the block buffs up now. If I put the block buffs up now, when he transforms into the other form, he will remove that and turn it into a block debuffs. I'm sorry, a block buffs. I don't want to turn the block debuffs into a block buff. So I don't want to use Cardiel's A2 right now. I'm just going to go ahead and keep healing with the A1. And I'm going to hope to survive the next nuke that's incoming, which is going to be scary. And as you can see, he extended the duration of his own buffs. So he has buffs for longer now, and he's going to hit harder, which is just all sorts of nightmares. So this wasn't great for me, but I'm still hopeful that the team composition is built the right way, and we're going to do okay. Everybody is healed to maximum. Lots of healing helps. And we're doing okay on the damage. But now he's going to sleep everybody. And there we go. There, Doom Priest proving her worth and just cleansing those sleeps so that Amius doesn't get back-to-back-to-back turns here on the other side. So again, he used his A3 to do that, to go ahead and sleep me. And that means he has his A2 left. And again, this is going to increase the duration of debuffs and decrease the duration of buffs on me. That's not a huge deal, but recognize that it does, in fact, increase the damage of the skill, right? So again, I'm going to try to avoid buffs here, but his buffs are going to run out, and so that's not so bad. How many turns do we have? We have 3 turns, so I am going to debuff him in the hopes of putting down some good damage before he transforms again. Don't want to buff myself. But this is looking pretty good. I have 2 turns here. I'm going to get a big nuke right here. That was weaker than I was hoping for. Now, I don't want to kill Amius in this form. Remember, I have to kill him in the other form. So from now on, I'm just going to A1. And hopefully, when he transforms into his other form, he's going to use his A3 to remove his debuffs. He's going to convert them into buffs. It should just be the weaken and the heal reduction there. And so he's not actually going to heal himself up. Remember, that skill doesn't heal. It's the A2 that heals. So in this particular case, I'm trying to force him to use his A3, which will stun me, by the way. So I want to put up my block debuffs buff on the next turn. So on the next go round, I'll have Cardiel put up his... Oh, he's getting an extra turn. All right, so we'll see if Cardiel is fast enough here to come around. Let's heal everybody. All right, so now I'm going to put up the block debuffs. This is where you need the block debuffs. Because if he goes into his other form and hits his A3, he will not only convert his debuffs into buffs, but he will stun me. So I'm going to see if he does that. But of course, I'm putting up several buffs now, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, he just used his A3. And as you can see, he had a weaken and a healing reduction, so now he gets 2 buffs. And so I've forced him into his A3, which is great, because that means he hasn't healed yet. And that means I could plan the block debuffs for his stun, so I didn't get stunned. Now I'm going to go ahead and try to get all the debuffs out there, including, ta-da, the healing reduction, which means when he does use his A2, he won't heal, and Newt's nuke should be the end of the story, unless the ally attack is the end of the story, which it might be. Not quite, because of the strengthen. So you can see he got no heal from his continuous heal buff, and he got no healing from his A2. That's how you use the healing reduction. Now let's go ahead and hit him. Game over. We've killed him in his main form. He is dead. You can see it's 18 minutes here, 102 turns, which is actually my best result, apparently, 102 turns. So it's not a quick fight, and it is a fight that's going to take you some time. You're going to have to manual, quite like Hydra, right? Like if you really want your best score in Hydra, you know, probably you have to manual the team, especially if you're in the mid game, right? That's just part of life with Braid. So it's the same here with Amius the Lunar Archon. The good news is every fight, even fights you lose, will teach you something about the fight. It'll let you know about the skills that fire, and it'll remind you when you're supposed to use your skills, because it'll punish you for doing them in the wrong order. Go ahead and read the comments so you can get some more ideas about good champions for this particular rotation. And again, don't forget the stats. You need to be careful with the debuffs and the buffs, but you also have to have the right speed, the right accuracy, and good HP, because he does ignore defense on certain hits. But I would not have defense. You know, I wouldn't just bring in champions with HP. So plenty of heals. If you don't have heals, by the way, consider things like leeches or lifesteal gear, like ways to keep your champions alive if you don't have a ton of healing champions. So if you just have a lot of DPS champions, you're like, okay, well, if we have a leech and some lifesteal gear, that might be enough to keep us alive as well. All right, so that is it. Let me know in the comments below, as well as the champions that you like to take. Was this helpful to you? Do you think this could inspire you to come in here and kick Amius's butt and get yourself some cool rewards? I hope it is. But if not, if you have questions, let me know any questions you have. Again, I'm happy to do more of these. Maybe we'll do another Amius video next rotation and clarify some of the things that we missed. I guess that's it today. Thanks so much for hanging out. I have been Cole Red, and I will see you in another video soon.